I'm just excited, man. I'm excited to connect with you. I'm excited to hear more and to learn more about
Yeah,
what you're doing, both in the business world and just in the ministry world and for the kingdom. And I'm also, one of the things that I'd like to do today, Jeff, is kind of get a little bit of your background story, like even your kind of origin story, what your life was like before you met Jesus, and then kind of how you came to know the Lord and stuff like that. I know some of the pieces, but I
sure,
don't really know the story, and so that's something that I would
sure.
love to get into. But before we do that, would you just kind of introduce yourself a little bit and share a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Sure. My name's Jeff Mason. I'm coming to you today from St. Louis, Missouri. My family and I lived in New Jersey, and that's how I came to know Duke and lived there for 32 years and moved there in 2001. So we've been out in Missouri ever since then. I have two daughters, 35 and 33 years old. I have two grandsons, 7 and 3. My wife and I have been
Wow,
married for 39 years. And
right
yeah, I
on.
had a little bit of a bad boy past. So I hitchhiked for 4 years of my life, and I met my wife hitchhiking. Believe it or not,
Really,
her boyfriend picked me up, and they were
her
on the
boyfriend
Fritz.
picked you up.
He did. They did. He picked me up in Brigantine, New Jersey. They were on the Fritz, unbeknownst to us, and
Mm,
lo and behold, God worked His miracles, and 39 years later, well, 41 years later, because we dated for a couple of years. Here we are, and so I'm very blessed about that, and came to know Christ in Princeton, New Jersey, 1987, Christmas Eve, which is a great story. I hope we'll get to a little bit, and then. I've been in sales, been in training, been in recruiting, been in sales training for a great part of my life. And I decided to write a book in 1989, spent 30 years putting that together, came out in 2019, started a
wow.
podcast. Yeah, started a podcast to augment the book. And so today my day job is I run a sales agency in the upper Midwest. And one of my streams of income is, this podcast and book that I've done. And really that's, what I hope Duke will be, what I'll be spending a lot of time on after I retire and I really start working the speaking circuit
Mm,
and doing a lot of consulting on that end.
yeah. No, that's fantastic. Man, I have so many questions. I have so many
Yeah. Yeah.
questions.
Yeah. Yeah.
First of all, so was when you got
Go
sorry to
ahead, man.
harp
Go ahead.
on some of these small details, but I'm so fascinated. It's such a cool story about how you got picked up hitchhiking by
Yeah.
your now wife's boyfriend
Right.
at the time. Was Monica in the car when you got picked up, or how did you get to meet her after the boyfriend picked you up?
No, she was not. In fact, I just told this story last night. I felt like God blessed me right there and then. I was going to change my bank account. I closed my school. I went to Stockton University, which for anybody who doesn't
Okay.
know, it's outside Atlantic City, New Jersey. And I was going to close my bank account on Brigantine, New Jersey, which is a little barrier
Mm,
island. And I went to close it. And back then it was microfiche. So I thought I had $6 or $9 somewhere in between there. I go to close it, and the lady says, okay, that's $609, right, sir? And I'm like, what do I do? I'm not saved at this point. I'm like, no, it's only, I think, like $6. She goes, oh my gosh, it's only $6.09. So literally, I felt like God was smiling on me. I go out to the
mm.
Brigantine Circle, put my thumb out, start hitchhiking, and her boyfriend comes by to pick me up. I was on my way to Absecon, New Jersey. And he just says, hey, I'm taking my girlfriend to Great Adventure. You mind if I pick her up first? And I said, hey, I'm bumming a ride with you, dude. I
Wow.
don't care where you take me. Just take me, up Route 30
Off
going
the
towards
street. Yeah.
Absecon. Yeah. So that's how I met her.
That's so cool.
Yeah. And then
I
bumped
have
into
a I
her.
have a story.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I have a similar bank story like that. There was a time where my wife and I, we were on the mission field in Mexico, and we were doing very bad financially. And it's just one of those things where we're just like praying and just believing God for breakthrough. And so we go to the bank, and we go to the fancier. They're all over the place now, but it was fancier at the time than anything that I had known from the States. And it was like, it had this like little door kind of thing that opened up for you to make deposits. And so it would like this door would kind of open up and you'd put your stack of bills in there and then it would take it through and you could deposit your money, through the ATM there. And so we were going to make a deposit so we could pay some bills. And so we initiated the transaction, and so the little door opens up, and when the door opens up, there's just this stack of cash just sitting there.
Oh my goodness.
And it was like this little door just opened, and it was like, "Hey, take me, like, I'm
Yeah,
yours, like,
yeah,
no
yeah.
one's gonna know." And so this little door opens, and, it was probably the equivalent at the time, and, it was pesos, obviously, but it was the equivalent of, like, probably 7 or $800 in cash. And so it's just sitting there, and we're just, like, sitting there like, this is not our money. Like, we
Wow.
can't take this money. So
Wow.
so we brought it inside and we gave it to the bank. But it was one of those things where, like, if you wanted to, like, over spiritualize the moment, you could be like, God, this is your answer to my prayers,
Right.
but, like, totally forget about what, like, integrity is all about in that
Right.
moment. And so anyway, just
Yeah,
resonated with me
great.
with that story that you had there. It's
No, did you feel blessed afterwards? Did you feel like God just smiled down on you after you did that or what?
it
Yeah.
took a little while. It
Yeah.
wasn't immediate. At first it was the feeling of loss.
Yeah.
Right at the beginning. And then, but no, very, very, very soon afterward, it was like, yeah, like we couldn't have even, like, you know what I mean? It was
Yeah.
maybe like a split second where in my mind, I'm like, is this the blessing of the Lord? Like, you know what I mean? Because there's just
Yeah.
money sitting there. And
Sure.
then of course all the knowledge of, kicked in of, this is somebody who was trying to make a deposit, and for whatever reason didn't go through, and they had no idea, and they're expecting this money to be in their bank account, and it's not going to be there. Like, it just immediately
Right.
started to think about that other person and recognize that, like, this obviously doesn't belong to me, and so I
Right.
can't take it. But yeah, so it was not immediate, but within probably, the first 30 minutes or so, just kind of like, yeah, this is a decision that we made for you, God. Like, we're doing this out of what's right and integrity. And he was so faithful. Like, even when we didn't have what we wanted, and even when offerings didn't come in, missionary offerings didn't come in the way they were supposed to and stuff like that, he was so faithful
Yeah.
to just not allow us to go under. We were able to, even like when we came off the mission field and we were coming back to the States, we did so with no, we didn't have any debt. And we were able to, even, like, we gave a whole bunch of stuff away when we were
That's
leaving,
awesome.
and it's just all of that,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
God was just so faithful through that. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, all that to say, like, when you're faced with something
Yeah.
like that, it's just always the best thing to just
Yeah.
maintain your integrity, and do the right thing.
Uh,
God's not trying to bless you by
yeah.
stealing from somebody else.
Well, listen, I had a plenty of instances prior to this where I did the opposite of what I did that day,
Yeah,
but
sure.
this was a day when I said, this doesn't sound right. And so, yeah, very
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, so 39 years of marriage,
Hmm.
you said.
Yep. Just
Um,
did a-
I've always loved your family. Your family and my family were very close back in the day, living in New Jersey together. We only lived at one point anyway, like 5 minutes apart,
Right.
and,
Very cool.
I was at your house all the time, and all that was just really, really cool. But what would you just share on, like, how you get to 39 years of marriage?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what, it's certainly a lot of prayer and a lot of working together and a lot of you know, uh, just understanding that this is a 50-50 relationship, and it doesn't always work that way. But when you really
Mm,
realize that, we're in this together as a team and we've now become one, you know, that, when we hit the tough times, we've got to work through it. And rather than walk away from it, work through. We've had tough times, and, we weren't, we both weren't saved when we initially got married, and Monica got saved 2.5 years before I did. And so there's a lot of strife, especially with my alcohol and drug addiction and all that. And, so there was a lot of pressure and a lot of weirdity that went on there. And we luckily hung on, or God kept us hanging on. And so I would just say to anybody, it's just because you're a Christian, just because you do life with God doesn't mean, everything's roses, as you know.
mm,
And it's
yeah,
it's but to try to imagine not, doing life with my wife and working through some of our situations without God, I can't imagine that. I can't
mm,
imagine what that road would have been like. I'm sure we wouldn't be together now, but
yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, it's incredible. It's such a cool story.
yeah.
Um, Well, let's talk about the book. So you said I didn't realize this. I did. I was aware that many years of business. Your involvement in business in different capacities and executive leadership roles, and just in different areas of business, owning running your own businesses and stuff like that, has gone into the formation of the book that you wrote, Simple Biz 360, right?
Right.
And so, but what I wasn't aware is that what you said a moment ago was that the idea for the book was actually birthed in your heart back in 1989.
Right.
Is that what you said? And
Right.
then it was a lifetime almost of walking
Yeah.
through and putting it together. So what did that look like? How did, looking back 30 plus years ago, and when that initial concept for the book, or the idea to write a book, or all that kind of started coming into your mind, what was that process like for you?
Yeah, well, it's a really pertinent question because what you have to understand and rewind my clock a little bit is I was almost failing at my entry level sales job in New York
Mm,
City. I was down in the Wall Street area working for Lanier Business Products, and they had trained me, for 4 weeks, and I abandoned the training. And what happened was I was very close to being let go because there's something called draw versus commission. I was basically $44,000 in the hole with them. And if I had another
mm,
$200 in the hole, I'd be fired. So I finally, one day, I accepted their training. I came in the next day and I literally started using it, and everything turned around. So
mm,
this was an important pivotal moment in my career, but it was an important pivotal moment for accepting Christ too, because what happened, if you think of two sets of railroad tracks, here's that business track that just showed me that training and advice and this information I was given helped me get back on a track and go the right direction. Well, now I'm hearing all this in my ear about God and his word and what's everything that's going on here. And finally, a couple of years, 2.5 years later, I give my life to Christ, and much the same thing happened. I had an aha moment when I started using the training in business, and I had this, aha moment. I had this conversion. I had this change of direction when I accepted Christ. So here I am in 1987, having experienced it professionally, having experienced it personally, and now I'm in 1989. I'm training. I'm hiring, college graduates. I hired 65 of them over a 2.5 year period. And now I've got 18 of them in this room, and I'm just loving that when we teach a concept, I see these light bulbs go off, and I can imagine like what it's
mm.
like to be a teacher at that point, a professor. I'm getting my satisfaction out of seeing epiphany moments, light bulb moments go off in these young entry level employees. And it was there that I said, I like this feeling. I want to do more of this. I want to write a book that gives, just at the end of my career, towards the end of my career, just somehow gives advice. So what I started doing is I had an empirical data center point, and that's what I call the silent business killers. And that's the
Okay.
epicenter of the book. And what I wanted to do was I wanted to live through situational observation to get the rest of my book. So I didn't want to rely on empirical data, go out and find Harvard business studies and all this, that. I had my empirical center point, and I wanted to live life recording what happened as I went down the business path. And I was fortunate enough to work for 32 companies in 9 different industries. So, my specialty today is improving the customer experience. So I got to immerse myself in 32 customer service machines, and that exposed me. It was like being an MBA and going out and being a consultant for 32 companies. I got a
Mm.
taste of how 32 companies handled the customer experience. And it really helped me. And so, I sit here today and I still love that ability to share something with someone that creates an epiphany moment, creates a redirection, creates a reboot. And Duke, there's no bigger reboot in life than John 3. I mean, when you go through that John 3 conversion,
Yeah.
you realize what Jesus means when he's talking to Nicodemus, who's, one of the smartest guys in the world, at this point, supposedly, right? And, it's simplified. Hence, I love, your podcast at one point was called SimpleBiz, your book, you've got that simple angle to it, right?
Mhm.
And simplicity was always a gravity point for me, that whatever I wanted to do, I wanted to try to simplify things for people, because I think
Yeah.
John
Yeah.
3 is super simplified, right? I mean,
Yeah, absolutely.
Jesus lays it out. Here it is, dude.
Yeah.
You got to kind of like, got to kind of get born again. What's it mean? Well, you got to end up in spiritual diapers, kind of, and you drink milk.
Mm.
I mean, he's not saying that, but
Yeah.
he's saying that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, there's some cool similarities there. So when I wrote the first book that I wrote, Simple Power, I started writing it in, I think, 2013 or so. And I started writing it, and I didn't know I was writing a book. I was just writing. I started writing about some concepts, some things that I was kind of learning about at the time that I didn't really have a whole lot of experience in. But I don't know if this is, maybe kind of like the process that you're describing in terms of business, where you had some epiphany moments, you had the idea for what you wanted to do, but then you wanted to be able to write through experience, or you
Correct.
wanted to be able to write from a place of experience and not just from, as you said, empirical data and stuff like that, or from
Right.
what you were hearing from other people. You kind of wanted to live it out.
Right.
And so I was kind of I was kind of in that place in terms of I was learning a lot about um, the supernatural aspect of our relationship with God, healing the sick, and just like all, experiencing God's
Right.
presence and that kind of stuff, but in just daily life, and just like experiencing God as a practical part of everyday life, and not just as some experience that happens every once in a while, but really just experiencing God's presence and power. And so, I was like getting revelation from God on stuff. And so I'm just writing about it. And then I realized, like there's a book here. And I kind of was in this like sprint at the time to finish this book in a short period of time. And ended up writing the book. I had a lot of it outlined, but I ended up writing the book in about 6 days.
Wow.
And
Wow.
it's not a very long book. It's 95 pages. It's not very long. And so again, simple. Like I wanted it simple. It's like 8 chapters. And so I wrote the book very, very quick, but then I didn't publish it for about 6 years.
Wow.
And so during that time, and that wasn't my original intention, but I do think that it worked out very, very well, because what I was able to do was to walk through a lot of the experiences that I was writing about that I didn't really have experience for yet,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
very few experiences. But then just through ministry and through, going on ministry trips and pastoring and, praying for the sick and seeing people healed and set free and having experiences with God of just like hearing his voice, and then something supernatural happens and like that kind of stuff, I was able to experience a lot of the concepts that in the book they were just kind of, you know what I mean? Like they hadn't been experienced yet.
Yeah.
And so I ended up releasing the book at the end of 2019. About midway through 2019, I felt the Holy Spirit like kicking me, like it's time. You
It's
got to
done.
get
Yeah.
this book out. You've sat on it long enough. And then I took about 3 months. It's funny
Yeah.
that I wrote it in 6 days, but I sat on it for 6 years, and then edited it for about 3 months, and
Yeah.
updated some things. I think I added a couple of stories in it where I could kind of talk a little bit from more of an experiential point
Sure.
of view, where I wasn't able to at the time when I wrote it. So yeah, so anyway,
Yeah.
not 30 years, but I get where you're coming
Yeah.
from. But what I'm super curious about is like just having that foresight to be able to, you have this concept, and then to say, I'm going to kind of progressively write this throughout the next. Did you have an idea? Like, did you have an endpoint in mind? Did you have any idea at the beginning that it was going to be 30 years? Or did you just know it was going to be a very long time? Or what was kind of your mindset on
Yeah,
that?
no, I thought it was going to be probably right around, Y2K, right around the 2000 period
Okay.
initially. When I made the statement in 1989, I told the room, I said, I'm definitely going to at some point in my life sit down and write a business book, and I don't know what it's going to look like, but I'm going to do it. So I kind of earmarked a goal, and I come from sales background where the goals and objectives were always, something that were so important to us. So, I kind of set this goal, and then, no, I never put a time limit. I just knew that it was, that it had to come after I was seasoned, and I had to be
Mm.
seasoned enough
Yeah.
to have enough meat to put on a plate, and to have it be meaningful. And really, it turned out in a lot of ways, most of the book is really third party influence that I've repackaged and represented. It's stuff that I learned. I tried it. If it worked, I applied it. If it didn't, I fried it. And,
Mm.
I try, I tested it along the way, and then, recorded the results of testing it. But the interesting thing was, it was a little bit ahead of its time, because this term customer experience we hear all the time now in marketing, and client engagement and client partner success. It's really at the forefront of things. And back then, I really realized it was all about the customer experience, and the silent business
Mm.
killers was the epicenter of it. It primarily focuses on what drives customers away, why do they go away, and what do they do once they leave your business, and,
Mm.
and they damage
Mhm.
your business is what they do. So it's really an
Wow.
interesting. So the 30 years. So I really started to sit down and write it 2016. I went to a cabin for 18 nights of my life in the Ozark Mountains, and spent all that
Hmm.
time really just turning technology off and being quiet, which was awesome.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
everybody's got what I've interviewed a few other people on my podcast who wrote books, and everybody's got a different rhythm and a different cadence and a different set of circumstances. So I find it fascinating that, you're 6 days, boom, and then 6 years you sit on it, and I mean, yeah, that's crazy. But hey, everybody has their own different thing. And, so it just, yeah, it was just something I knew I would do. And,
Mm.
Duke, I think I can't remember exactly what, the feelings I had exactly back after I got saved in 1987. But I do remember this. God took alcohol and drugs away from me when I got saved, and I didn't have
Mm.
to go through any step process. I didn't have to do anything,
Wow. Wow.
and it was bad. And, and so what I realized at that point was God was saying, look, dude, I'm showing you how real I am. Now you've got to do something with this. You can't, I
Yeah.
didn't do this so you could tell your relatives. You could tell, you and your wife could sit around and talk about it. I did this
Yeah.
because you need to tell other people this story. So, I didn't write a Christian book. I was a Christian guy that wrote a book, but now we're getting the
Mhm.
opportunity through Christian Business Network. I was able to blend it together into a course. I'm going to try to get it on, into a Christian course, if you will. But so now I'm kind of really expanding it a little bit, and I'm excited that I'm able to draw the Christian point of view in there too.
Yes. Yeah, and we'll make sure that before we end here that we mention links and where we can go, where
Sure,
people can go to find everything, and then I'll share links in the show notes of
sure,
the podcast
appreciate it.
as well. But yeah, that's really, really cool. I actually I love that. I love that you are, even with the podcast. So the book and the podcast, I guess the podcast was birthed out of the book, right?
Yeah,
Or inspired by the book. So with the book and the podcast, yeah, like as you said, like you wrote these for the business world. You wrote these, you wanted to serve the business community, but you did so, of course, as a Christian, and your
right,
perspective comes from, someone who's been transformed by the love and the power of Jesus Christ. And so it's not a Christian platform per se, but it's written from your perspective. And so I love that. I love that, and I think that we need more of that. We don't just need Christian podcasts. We need Christians who podcasts. We need
yeah,
Christians
bingo.
who run businesses. We need Christians who are infused into every sector of society, and just adding that kingdom element. And I think that if we, as the people of God, wherever God has stationed us in life, and whatever area, sector of society, we're there, and we should have, as a core passion of our lives, it should be to serve. because I think in serving the people and the communities and the organizations that we've been um, stationed or positioned into by God, then I think that that's where we really have a tremendous opportunity to impact people with the love of Jesus Christ and show people, what this is really all about. In beyond just, oh, you really need to get saved right now because Jesus loves you. Like there's that element of the way that we proclaim the good news of Jesus
Right.
Christ, but there's also living our lives and teaching and just different things that we do, but from a perspective of somebody who has just been set free and
Right.
redeemed by the blood of the Lamb. And so we bring just his love and his passion into what we do in terms of the work of our hands, what we do in the marketplace or in the business world or whatever. And so I love what you're doing, and I just think it's a really cool way to serve people and to serve the world through just sharing your life, sharing your experiences, sharing the things that you've learned
Yeah.
through the years. And I will say that I think you're incredibly generous in this book that you wrote. Because what I think, is it 255
Tools. Yeah.
tools, or yeah,
Yeah.
tools. So, what a I mean, you could have split that up into like 8 books if you wanted
Yeah.
to, you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
And done it that way and just tried to milk as much as you can out
Yeah.
of that process. But it's just really, really cool how generous you were in just putting this resource together and said, I really just want to have an impact.
Yeah, I know, and and I'm at the point now where I look at, I don't know about you, but one of my favorite bands of all time is Switchfoot, and I just love Switchfoot because they have the ability to say we're Christian men, but we play some kick butt rock and roll,
Yeah.
And I'm a Christian guy, and I better be able to back it up with my actions. And I fail people.
Mm,
I'm not perfect. I make mistakes. If I make them, I apologize. But my intentions every day are to go out, and I call it a Philippians 2, 3, 4 challenge. Every day I try to go out and make sure that I do nothing from vain conceit, and everything I do in humility, where I look at others having, their interests should be more important than mine. I got my own, but to try to serve like that. So I really kind of, I'm excited about being able to be a Christian that writes a book and goes out and helps businesses. And I'm not telling them to go be Christian, but I better be able to back up what I say. And for the most part,
yeah.
again, if I make a mistake, I hope I've been, a good steward of going out there and apologizing and telling people I recognize it was my mistake, and which I have. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
but I'm sure I've slipped, missed a few here and there, and but still, man, it's a process. And but Switchfoot is just, if I thought of a band that did that in music, I'd think of Switchfoot. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
Great
Yeah,
band.
they're great. They're fantastic, and they've been around since, I was a kid.
Yeah. Oh
Been
gosh. Yeah.
around
I
for a
mean, I
long
started
time.
listening to
Mhm.
mid '90s, and it was really, yeah, but just really I dig them, and a bunch of surfer boys from SoCal, and yeah, they do
Yeah.
it right. Yeah.
Yeah, we were listening to them, like, I remember being in youth group, and they were they were growing in popularity around that time, like, in the '90s in Christian circles, but it wasn't until I think it was, like, 2003, 2004 when they started hitting some, like, mainstream stuff. They
Yeah.
put out a couple of songs that were, like, really popular on the radio, to, like, where my friends who were not Christians, they started to talk about Switchfoot, and I was like, "Oh, yeah, I've known them for, like, 8 years."
Yeah. Yeah. There you go. Yeah. I know. Cool. Yeah, and I mean, it's great. You just, really kind of like the Bruce Springsteen of the modern day with the poet, that the way that they can work some of the lyrics in there is just
Mm,
awesome. So,
yeah.
yeah. So, I mean, yeah, having fun now. Just learning how to expand on all this, and the podcasting, dude. I never thought I'd do this. I mean, my editor was actually the one that said, "You need to do this." And I said, "I'm not going to do a
Yeah.
podcast." She goes, "No, you need to
Yeah.
do one today." And so I initially thought I was just going to do audio, and I went and I sought out a company in St. Louis that would help me, and they said, "Oh, Jeff, you got to do video. I mean, your YouTube numbers will
Mhm.
crush your Apple numbers." And I was like, "What?" And so, yeah, they said it's a big search engine. You got to go for it. And so we did it from day one. Happy about it. Never missed a week. I come out Thursday mornings at 6 o'clock, and we haven't missed a week.
Wow.
And we just we're launching 148 today, so 148 weeks in a row.
Yeah, good for you. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
that's fun.
Yeah, so how much do you enjoy the podcasting element of this as far as, you doing it, whether some of these episodes you do by yourself and some of them you do with a guest, and, yeah, I don't know, for me, I started out doing the Simple Power podcast, which was kind of a similar again, another
Yeah,
similarity where the podcast was inspired by the book. I wrote the book first and I published well, actually, I was in the process of getting the book out when I started the podcast. So I had a handful of episodes out before the book was officially released, but it all started with the book. And then I ended up, I did 100 episodes, and then I ended up pivoting away from that. Not away from it, but I refaced
yeah,
the way that I do podcasting because I really just enjoyed the handful of times with the old podcast that I did an interview and had a guest on. I really enjoyed like I liked it so much better, just the back and forth and all of that. And I just like this dynamic. I think it's a really cool dynamic for being able to learn and just have fun and all of that. So I transitioned into something that's a little bit more just kind of basic. So we can talk about business, we can talk about Jesus, we can talk about ministry. It's just
yeah,
kind of whatever we want, and it's not as much of a niche kind
yeah.
of a topic that I was kind of tied to with the other podcast, which again I thought was great, and it's still out there somewhere. You can find it and get the episodes, and I think they're really helpful tools for just helping you grow in your walk with the Lord. But anyway, all that to say, I've really enjoyed this element of just the interview style and talking with people and getting into stuff. And so anyway, what do you like about podcasting? What's kind of your favorite
Yeah.
element to the whole thing?
I tell you the truth, it's the creative process of putting together a show. And
Mm,
Duke, some people are artists, some people are songwriters, some people can do all kinds of different things to express their creativity. And for
yeah.
me, what I love to do is just, like I'll be running. I still actively run. Been doing that for 42 years. I'm out on a run. I know I usually try to tape 4 or 5 monologues at one day. So I kind of stack them up, and boom, the thought will come to me. The title will come to me in a run. I'll get home. I'll type it out when I get home, right from the run. And now I have the title, or I have the concept, and then I start building around it. And so for me, it's that creative process where I finally end up with my final Word document. That's the flow of the show. And this is what I'm going to
Mm,
market with. And
yeah.
so, I've been able to, whether it's been an interview, and a lot of my interviews, I'll really do a lot of upfront research on the person, then my questioning, including even reading the book and their book, and a questioning will be really more for them than it is for me, and really in depth. And it just that whole thing about when I finally end that show and have that mold made, the satisfaction I get is done. The show to me is the fun part. I've just
Mm,
never been
yeah.
afraid to public speak or talk to people, and just so that's the fun part, to finally execute it. But my real yayas are in the building, molding of the show process. I mean, do you get
Yeah.
any kicks out of that at all, or
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, my favorite thing because now all of my episodes are with a guest,
yeah,
or a couple of guests, usually just one, but sometimes but and I've done I think maybe 3 along the way where it was just me, just kind of talking and just sharing my heart about something. And so usually that'll happen if it's like a holiday or something like that where I
yeah,
don't, want to ask people to give up their 4th of July to be on a
right,
podcast, you
right,
know.
right,
But yeah, so anyway, so all of mine are in conversation, and I will I'll do the same thing. I'll prepare. I'll get into, if it's a book that we're going to be discussing, I'll do my best to get the book, to read the book
yeah,
or read as much of the book as possible beforehand. I do these twice a week, so I don't always, I
yeah,
will confess, I don't always get a chance to read the whole book the episode, before we get to the recording and all that. But I do my best, or familiarizing myself with somebody's
Sure.
podcast or their work or whatever. Sometimes
Sure.
they're people that I know, so I'm already very familiar with the person.
Yeah.
But yeah, but it's my favorite thing by far is just connecting with people,
Yeah.
and just that, so sometimes it's reconnecting with somebody from my past, like you. Like, this is amazing. It's like,
Yeah.
it's my absolute favorite part of this whole thing, is connecting with people, reconnecting with people from my past, and connecting with new people, and just learning about their life, and just being able to have some conversation, which again, it's always Christ-centered,
Yeah.
in some way. We might really just spend some time just talking about how good God is, and we might
Yeah.
spend more time,
Yeah.
talking about, a particular aspect of leadership or whatever it might be, and then there's some just joking around stuff that
Yeah.
happens too along the
Well,
way.
you
But
know,
yeah,
some,
just connecting with
yeah,
people is by
isn't
far
it?
my favorite thing.
You know, the other thing I learned too, dude, just last night, I never really realized how nervous guests get. But
Mm,
last night we had a couple in from Hillsborough. So if you look back on my podcast, I think it's like episode 60 or 61. It's the Dawn and David G and Betty interview. And they're a couple
okay.
that went to Hillsborough High School in New Jersey with my wife. And they
Shout
own,
out to my alma mater.
there you go. I mean, I knew you. Yeah. So they own 4 marinas down in Forked River, now 5. And so they were my guests on that show, and it was, let them kind of tell their story. And so last night they breezed through Missouri. They stayed on their way to Utah. They stayed a night. We had dinner and we talked. And David said it was probably one of the 2 most stressful things he's ever endured in
Wow.
business. And I mean, he's hobnobbed with some big money shakers out there. And I just found that fascinating that, you know, I've had other guests tell me the fact that, oh gosh, thank you so much for shepherding me through that. I was
Mm.
really nervous in the first 5 minutes. I didn't pick it up. Sometimes I do, but sometimes I don't. And, I just never realized. Did you ever run into that where you find out that people are really nervous about being on camera with you?
I've had a couple. I've had a couple times where it was obvious,
Yeah.
and yeah, that's an interesting thing as well. Where you want to kind of do something at the beginning to try to like break the tension, or
Yeah.
to try to just help the person to relax.
Yeah.
That's really cool. That's part of being a gracious host, and I think it's something that I'm still learning. But what I've always tried to do from the beginning, well, at the beginning I wasn't very conscious of it, but then people started to make comments to me that I was doing it, and then I kind of decided, I was like, yeah, you know what, that's something that I want to strive to do, which is framing the conversation or questions in a way that really, I'm trying to think of the best way to say it, like, um I I wanna kind of set it up so that the person's heart kind of comes out in the
Yeah.
interview process, or that, I just wanna be gracious in the way that I do things,
Yeah.
so that the person, feels honored and feels valued and stuff like that throughout the process. And I feel like that can kind of, sometimes help somebody to
Sure.
relax and be comfortable. I remember one time I had a guest on, and I was just like, she was actually telling me, she was expressing to me that she's kind of like introverted. And this was on the podcast live. She was telling me that, she was telling me that. And so I said, well, you know what? Let's just break the tension right now and just have an awkward silence. And so, like, we just sat there for like 15 seconds, just long enough for it to get like super uncomfortable. I was like, all right. So then we got that part out of the way. Like, let's keep going. And she was great. She was awesome. She was a fantastic guest. But yeah, so I try to pick up on those things as much as I can. I don't usually notice. I feel like most people, because like I get nervous sometimes, even like
Sure.
before the show goes live, and especially if I'm talking with somebody that I don't know at all, or
Sure.
somebody who maybe I've like looked up to for a long time, and I just feel like I've been just blessed with an opportunity to have this person on the show, and I want to do a good job, and I want to make them look good, and all of that, stuff runs through my head. And so there's times when I'm nervous, and hopefully it doesn't come across as like, manic or like
Yeah. No,
whatever.
yeah. Yeah. No,
But
I can't see how it would. Yeah. But Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. It's really one of those things that we have to be sensitive to, and there's a lot of podcasting out there now too. I noticed that where people are just it's like rapid fire podcasts. You go on
Mm,
these services that match you up, and people are scheduled 2 months out. They're doing two a day, one a day, and it's a factory. And it's kind of
right.
there's I don't know, some portions of it just make me feel uncomfortable. I like the more organic thing. I
Yeah,
mean,
me too.
I
Me too.
like this, yeah. And we're definitely organic. By the way, I got to tell you, I don't know if you have this memory, folks listening. You got to check this out. So Duke was, is friends with my daughters, and we're growing up in New Jersey, and so my daughters never really adhered towards playing organized sports. I thought maybe I'd
Mm,
have two little ponytailed soccer girls running around. I played soccer. That didn't happen.
mhm.
Maybe softball or whatever. That didn't happen. They were dancers. They picked dancing. I supported it. That's fine. But
Right.
we were at a picnic one day, a summer picnic, and you had your baseball and your mitt out, and I forget what it was, but you couldn't get anybody to play catch with you, and you were a little guy, and I
No
said,
friends?
dude, let me run home and get my mitt. I ran home and got my mitt, came back to the picnic, and I don't know if you remember this, but you and I played catch for about an hour.
Man, that
And
is so cool.
And I still remember that to this day, because it's the only hour I ever threw a ball in my young parenthood with anybody. I never
Wow.
had that.
Wow.
I never had that experience, and I was, I
Wow.
mean, come on, I did that with my dad every night after dinner for years of my life. So here I
Wow.
was with the Dukester, playing catch for about
The
an hour at the
Dukester.
picnic. It was great. It was great.
I forgot about that nickname, the Dukester. Yeah, no, so it was good for both of us then. So it was good
Yeah.
for both. So
Yeah.
you saved me from, not having any friends or whatever it was that for whatever reason I couldn't get anyone to play catch with me, and then I got to help you kind of relive your
Oh,
childhood a little bit and
dude, I was like, I was on cloud nine for a couple of days after. I was like, yeah, I got to
oh,
catch
that's
it.
awesome.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
That's so cool.
yeah,
That's so cool. Thanks for sharing that.
yeah. You're welcome.
Can I want to
Yeah,
read
yeah,
the verses that you brought up.
yeah.
Um I had it here. I don't know what I did with it. Um yeah, from Philippians chapter 2 verses 3 and 4. You mentioned this before, and I just want to bring it up. But by the way, cuz I forgot to ask you before we started, what time you have to stop cuz
You know what?
we've done about 45 so far.
Yeah, I'm good for it. Every time you think you want to, let your
Okay.
audience cap off. Yeah,
Okay. So Philippians 2, verses 3 and 4. Let nothing be done through selfish ambition or conceit, but in lowliness of mind, let each esteem others better than himself. Let each of you look out not only for his own interests, but also for the interests of others. So that's Philippians chapter 2, verses 3 and 4. If you keep reading into verse 5, it says, let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus. So this mindset that's being described here by Paul in Philippians chapter 2, let nothing be done through selfish ambition or conceit, but esteem others better than yourself. Like that mindset that's being described there, it is the mind of Christ. It is
right,
the way that God thinks, and we see that so clearly and so beautifully and so profoundly in the life of Jesus and him coming and even making the statement, the Son of Man didn't come to be served, but to serve and to give his life a ransom for many,
right,
and coming to lay his life down in the ultimate act of surrender, the ultimate act of service, just
right,
wanting to coming to serve this world, to serve us so beautifully and so perfectly that it actually brings us to the Father when we accept what He's done for us. And I just, I just bring this up. You mentioned it, and I wanted to kind of ask you how this sort of mindset of serving, and I know in a lot of what you do in the business world that you are just constantly infusing principles from Scripture and principles of the kingdom into business and in what you do there. And so, just curious, like how to you do these verses or this mindset of serving and looking out for the interests of others fit into the business world?
sure. Yeah, I think I think certainly for us who are Christians and do have that model to live by, that if we can look at this group of verses and say that, what we're really trying to do is create in business a good customer experience that leads to a repeat business transaction or a referral for another trend. Let's
Mm,
say you're a deck builder, you're a one and done guy. You're done with this deck, you want to, referral for another deck. So if we can look at the daily function that we have as business people, and we say to ourselves, look, I want to make money, sure, but I'm not going to do anything that's out of vain conceit or selfish. I'm going to do
mm,
everything in humility to show this customer that I am here to be a good shepherd, be a good steward, be a good servant to them. They're giving me their hard-earned money. I want to make sure they get a pleasing, satisfying product and a pleasing, satisfying experience in return. That's what God's called me to do. So yes, my interests are important, but you know what? You're the customer, I'm the vendor, I'm the business. Your interests at this juncture are more important than mine. And I think
wow.
if we can set our businesses up, and I look at railroad tracks and I say, if we know the railroad tracks God has set up for us as the
Mm,
model, we can just lay our business railroad tracks right next to it. And we've got the opportunity to drive our trains side by side with God and make sure that we're aligning. Now, that scripture also is wonderful for even a non-Christian. If you're a non-Christian and you're doing this and you haven't come to know Christ, that's still the essence of business, because you're trying
mm,
to create a customer pleasing experience that leads to a repeat transaction or referral. How do you do that? You do that because you're demonstrating to a customer that, hey, I respect your time, I respect your money, I respect the fact that you gave me this way to satisfy you. And that's the simplicity of it. And I just
wow.
think it's a pivotal, really deeply rooted two-verse set of commands that, man, if we're not grabbing onto that as Christians in business, we're missing the essence of what we're called to do.
Mm, yeah. Yeah, it's so good. Yeah, it's like it says, "Let nothing be done through
Yeah.
selfish ambition or
Yeah.
conceit." It's like, okay. And yeah, I think when it comes to business, when it comes to ministry, when it comes to whatever, like we can get so focused, or I don't know, we could even call it, instead of focus, we could call it distracted probably by the stuff that we have to do, like all this stuff that's important, right? Getting the stuff out on time and just
Right.
whatever it
Right.
is that we're talking about, right? Getting everything done, crossing all the T's, all of that kind of stuff. Um, but if in the process of that, we're forgetting that the whole point of me being here, the whole reason this business, this church,
Yeah.
this organization, like this family, whatever, like the whole reason this exists is so that we can give to people, we can give back to people, we can serve people, we can impact the lives of people and somehow make their life better. It's the mission statement on like every single organization, right? Like to better the lives of people by blah blah blah, by doing this. And
Right.
so that's always the thing, that's always the mission. But I think that a lot of times the way that if you were to delve into the nitty gritty and the way that things are actually being done, whether it's on like an employee in an internal level, the way that your people
Right.
inside the organization are treated, or if it's the way that really think about the people that you're supposed to be serving as customers and
Right.
clients. We would probably find that in a lot of situations, in a lot of contexts, that that serving is not really the number one priority, right?
Bingo.
but but that's really everything, and everything that we're doing, that should be the goal. And I think if that is the goal, then what you're saying is that over time, like if my goal is to serve as well as possible, doesn't mean I'm giving everything away for free, but you know what I mean? But like if I is to serve as well as possible, then it might cost me more upfront. It might mean slimmer margins up front, or
Right.
it might mean that I don't see a return as quickly as possible or as quickly as I want to, or whatever. But I think what it results in is longevity, and it results in brand loyalty, it results in customer loyalty, it results in, people coming back for more, because you're building not just you're not building a brand around just a product or a service, but you're actually building trust
Yes.
around, a culture that you're establishing. Would you say
Correct.
that that's a fair
Very, yeah,
way to
very,
look at things? Yeah.
very accurate. Yeah, no, and
Yeah.
it's a really, I think, relationships are everything. Think about how many times you've heard in church that it's our, it it's not so much religion, but it's a relationship we have with God, right? It's not so much
Mm,
the business transaction, it's the relationship we are building with customers the same way. We're trying to create an experience for them that shows them. We don't want to tell them who we are, but it shows them that we operate from a different, we report to a different CEO. We report, we have a different board of directors. It's God,
yeah. Yeah.
it's Jesus, it's the Holy Spirit. We're wired differently, and we want you to see that we operate the way that God wants us to operate. And as a result, I
Mm,
think you end up getting that customer gets a better product. And as a result, that trust is easier built. And there's plenty of non-Christian businesses and business operators that achieve this and do this. There's no question.
absolutely.
But
Yeah.
it's just, I think for us, if we're conducting business as Christians deviantly, we are looking at ambition, self-ambition, and vain conceit, and those are our benchmarks. And we're looking at the vain, the very ugly political and media type celebrities that are out there that are showing us how to
Yeah.
do business the deviant way, and we're grabbing onto that as Christians and going out every day and doing business that way. It's horrible. And,
Wow.
yeah, we might make less money. We might get taken advantage of here or there. But you know what? In the end, that's not God's work. He'll work that out. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He'll work that
Yeah.
out. And you just keep doing what you should be doing, and everything will take care of itself.
Yeah. Absolutely. Whew, love it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So as part of the and we'll get ready
Okay.
to, we're coming up on an hour. We'll get ready
Okay.
to wrap things up,
Okay.
Jeff. But as part of the Biz 360, or excuse me, Simple Biz 360 podcast, you've got something going on right now,
Yep.
which is yeah, talk about what you have going on right now as far as this format that you are currently working on for the podcast. So it's three business tips in 5 minutes,
Right. Yeah. So,
right? Yeah, talk about that.
correct. Yeah. No, thank you very much. So, what we really decided to do is shift gears a little bit, and aside from interviews, we'll do some interview formats, but when we get down to a monologue format, I think rather than being 10 minutes, 12 minutes, 18, 22, where we've been in some cases,
Hmm.
30 in some cases, minutes, we want to shave it down to a nice, light, tight, and, really compact show of 5 minutes. We realize everybody's time is in a competition for listening to this, that, or the other. I think podcasts have probably exploded twofold
Oh
since
yeah.
we started
Oh
doing them.
yeah.
There's so much competition for someone's ear out there or set of eyes that we wanted to make it really easy to tune into us every week, get a show, get 3 good tips, and move on. And so we've
Mm.
started. So, we're going to have a playlist on our YouTube channel that has the playlist 3 biz tips in 5 minutes. We're on 28 listening platforms. So iHeart, Spotify, Stitcher, Apple, you name it. We're on all those. You can certainly listen to a podcast there, but on YouTube, you can go right to the playlist if you want and just start pulling these down. So we're excited because it's going to breeze along and hopefully leave you with some. And I really like the format in that it's trying to leave somebody with the ability to go away and think about their business, ask themselves questions about their business. I'm not necessarily saying, hey, here's all this great advice, do what I say to do. I'm saying, hey, here's some advice, but you need to think about how it works.
Yeah.
It doesn't work in your business. And that's really where, you know, we're trying to leave it. So before your cup of
That's
coffee's
great.
gone, my podcast is out, it's done.
Yeah.
You know?
No, that's great. Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, how would you say, just thought about this as you were talking. You mentioned a little bit ago, toward the beginning of the podcast, you mentioned how when you initially had this idea back in 1989 to write the book, um, and so in that time period of the 80s and 90s, you mentioned how that customer experience was really kind of everything. And of course, it still is today. But the way that business is done today, the way that things have shifted just with the internet and social media and everything is so vastly different. What are some things, or that you've just kind of noticed in being involved in this world, even of coaching and training business leaders and stuff like that, being involved in this world for so long and seeing the different changes, seeing the changes, like even just with the internet becoming a part
Yeah.
of business, to where now everything is, it's all basically social. Social
Yeah.
media is just kind of at the foundation of the way that a lot of people run their businesses. How would you say things have shifted, or have things shifted in terms of the way that just that, maybe a business tip here, just as the way that people are approaching business today in terms of client retention and customer satisfaction?
Yeah. Yeah, certainly things have changed. The digital transformation has really, as it continues to move, has changed the landscape of doing business. And and there's a lot of good with that, a lot of great. There's some bad too, but a lot of great stuff. You just think about when I started in business, to track a package, an overnight package, was an
Mhm.
absolute hour long process. Where
Yeah.
today, if you're not getting information, boomeranged back to you in about, in an email telling you what the tracking number is and when it's coming, within milliseconds, it's almost a bad experience. So a lot of that has changed for the better. But I think still the essence of it, the reason you see that from companies is they've asked themselves the question, how do I service a customer in a way where I get to them before they get to me? And I still think that's the art, that was the art of the deal in
Wow.
my head back in 1989. How can we go out and get to people before they get to us? How can we give them what they deserve, regardless of whether they asked for it or not? Those are some key elements. Now, what doesn't change and what has gotten worse, I think, in many ways, is there's this disconnect with the human to human exchange. And why do I say that? I think as we rely more and more on digital communication, text messaging, fast, furious social media posting, chats, abbreviations, acronyms, cryptic communication, we lose that ability to look somebody in the eye and
Mm.
understand. Like you said something about a podcast, you could read when someone's nervous, you kind of read when they were nervous. We're missing, I think, that ability to read people. I'll give you a great example real
Mm.
quick. In a restaurant, my wife and I, after Sunday church, we're sitting we're sitting in a restaurant, sit at a booth, and the booth is elevated, so it's up about 8 inches. So here comes a lady with the hostess, and she's got a cane, and she's got a hitch in her, walk, and she's having a tough time walking. So the young lady simply says, "Okay, ma'am, here's your seat up here at this booth." And the woman says, "We're right there." So we overheard it. She goes, "Oh gosh, I'm sorry. I have a hitch in my leg. There's no way I can swing my hip up there
Mm.
and get into that elevated booth. Is there any way we could sit at this foretop that's empty, that's right here on level ground?" "No, I can't sit anybody there for 30 minutes." And it was just this cold, calculated
What?
response. And so
Yeah.
this woman, and basically what you're saying is, you know what, lady, you better figure out your hitch. If you want to eat here, you're gonna have to
Yeah.
swing that hip up there. I don't care how you do it, but and I think we're missing that. I see it, I hear it, I witness it constantly. We're missing that ability to understand what human to human is doing. You know what I mean? And I
Mm.
think as we get into
Yes.
this digital transformation, our client engagement is beginning to separate and become further and further apart. And so, I think that
Yeah.
is something that's dangerous for us.
Wow. That's something, man. That's something that happens all the time in restaurants, and it's interesting today how, because of COVID and everything that happened, having come through this past season, it's like you go into a restaurant and they're at full capacity, but half the tables are empty, and
Right.
it's whether it's because they're short staffed, or well, usually that's what the problem is these days. It's because it's short
Right.
staffed, and I understand from having worked in restaurants. I understand the idea of like this section of the restaurant is closed. So even though there's tables there, we don't have a server working in that section. So even though there's tables there, they're not open right now. Like I understand that. And I understand wanting to maintain that because it helps with it just helps with everything that's going on in the restaurant to stay on top of things and everything. But I also know from having worked in restaurants that if the customer's asking me for something that's going to make their experience better and there's a possibility for me to do it, then like I'm going to do it. So like I mean, there were times when I was all over the restaurant because like this person wanted to have a different table, for whatever reason that
Right.
was outside of my section and whatever. Like that was the kind of thing that just never computed with my brain to tell somebody no, especially in a situation like that where it's like a health related issue. It's not even just a preference. It's like I physically can't do that. And you're telling me
Yeah,
you're not going to
yeah.
accommodate this. Like
And,
what
and
are we here for? Why
yeah,
does this restaurant exist? It exists for you,
you
like
see
to
what I mean?
give you a good experience.
Bingo. Go back to Philippians 2:3-4, right? Think about that.
Mhm.
Because and I call it weight bearing loads, WBLs. So here's what's
Mm.
happening in a simplistic format. That restaurant is saying, and hold on one second, I got to get this. Hold on. So that restaurant is basically saying, I've got a weight bearing load here. And
Uh-huh.
it's around my neck right now. And this weight bearing load is around my neck. And that is that if you want to sit there on that
Mhm.
flat, that foretop that's on level ground, then we
Yeah.
have to rearrange everything in here. And we don't have equity of distribution of tables like we'd like to with the wait staff. So what we're going to do, ma'am, we're going to transfer this weight bearing load to you. You put this around your
Mhm.
neck. We're going to make this experience more difficult for you, and we're not going to
Come
wear
on.
this anymore.
Come on.
That's fundamentally sick. That's
Yes.
fundamentally incorrect. And that is
Yeah.
where we're missing the boat. And it gets me riled up because we're transferring these weight. I had a situation the other day. The company said to me, hey, could you get your customer to change these 10 purchase orders and get them to calibrate it to 256 cartons instead of 192? I said, why would I do that? We've been putting 192 cartons on these pallets for years. Well, it'll
Mhm.
make the job easier for our people in the distribution center this year based on everything we got going on.
Okay.
So you want me to tell a customer to go change. So you're transferring that weight bearing load. You're saying, hey, you know what? Let's transfer this over to the customer. We'd like to make it
Wow.
more difficult for you.
Wow.
You change all your POs because if it comes in at 256 cartons per pallet, it's easier for us. No, fundamentally wrong.
Mm.
So
Yeah, yeah,
this is
yeah.
where and is that Philippians 2:3-4? You know what I mean?
Come on. Mhm.
That's ambition is for them to be served, not for them to serve. And
Wow.
that's, you know what I mean? And so it's just putting the horse before the cart. And that kind of stuff gets me charged up. But that's what's happening so often today in business. And it's getting worse and worse over time that
Wow.
I've seen.
Wow.
So sorry to
Come
get
on.
animated and leave I had
No,
my
you're great.
the little
That was a good little
WBL.
object lesson. That
Yeah,
was
it was
good.
hanging on a mannequin over there. The mannequin's falling as I'm grabbing it. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Crazy.
No, that's good. Yeah, it's like transferring that load to the person that I'm supposed to be serving.
And we do it all the
Um,
time, and we
yeah.
don't even know it. And that's what I love about when we're in restaurants, on phones, in stores, in gas stations, or convenience, wherever we are. Just listen to what's going on around you. You'll hear some stuff that'll blow you away. And you're like, wow,
Yeah.
how can people do that? How can they be
Yeah.
so blind to see, excuse that terminology, but how can they be so naive to see that they've just transferred that huge, time consuming, strenuous load of work to the customer?
Mm. Yeah, and I think when it happens on an employee level, it's a little bit more understandable because I think one of the most important things that we can do, this is again with any organization,
Yeah.
if we're talking about a church, we're talking about a business, one of the most important things that we can do is to build a healthy culture, right? And so as we're doing that, part of it is getting the people that either work for you or volunteer for you is to cast vision to the extent that they can kind of take ownership of what's happening, so that, because if that employee doesn't take ownership of the values of the company that say, like, our goal here is to give customers a good experience and stuff like that, and their whole mindset is, I'm just here for my paycheck, which is understandable. Like,
Right.
if you haven't been taught, if you haven't been, brought into
Right.
the vision and haven't bought into it. But when you have that buy-in that says, like, I'm not just here for my paycheck. Like, that's the ultimate reason. If there was no paycheck, obviously I wouldn't be here. But since I'm here,
Right.
how about I buy into this a little bit to where, I'm kind of sharing the load. I'm kind of and I'm sharing the values of what this organization is offering, so that now, like, when somebody comes in and they're asking for something that's going to be inconvenient for me, then, like, I'm able to put myself in their shoes and empathize and say, hold on, like, let me do this. What's really frustrating is when, I mean, I've been in situations where it's been like the management staff in like, I mean, I'm picking on
Right.
restaurants, but I mean, that's where I've experienced this a lot, is, where it's been the management people that are supposed to have some kind of buy-in, I would think, to be in that position. Like, there should be value sharing in
Sure.
the company and what the company's all about, because they've been promoted, like, they've gotten to a higher level. And so where the managers, like, don't even seem to care. And it's like, okay, like, how deep into the
Yeah.
into the roots of this company is this thing going? And it's unfortunate. But anyway, all that to say that, yeah, um that buy-in, getting that buy-in and getting people to take ownership, is that something that comes up in, because I know you do, like, speaking engagements and you talk to people on more of an executive and coaching and training level and stuff like that. Is that something that comes up? And, like, what would you say is, um, something? And I said we were wrapping up. That was like 12
Yeah.
minutes
Yeah.
ago.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
cool though. It's cool though. But yeah, just to, like, maybe close things out here.
Yep.
Um, what's something that you could share for somebody? Because I think this will add value,
Yeah.
in terms of, if you're the leader of an organization, or you lead a section of an organization or whatever, you have people
Yep.
under you that you're leading. What is something, like, what's a principle, or what's something that could help us to better instill the values, or better cast vision, or to kind of create that culture of buy-in, where, I'm not just here, doing the bare minimum, but I actually care about this company, or this organization, and I actually, want to, take on some of those values and bear some of that load. Like,
Yeah.
what's something that you
Sure.
think makes it easier to instill those kind of values in our people?
Sure. So I'll answer it two ways. I think the first way to answer that really is authenticity. I think that employees, when they look at management, the management tier, the executive tier, C-suite tier, and if there's a different set of operating examples demonstrate, that they're seeing, that the employees are
Mhm.
seeing and hearing, they're being told, and the employees are being told to operate in another way. There's this hypocrisy. So there's this disconnect between management and the rank and file worker. So I think
Right.
the first thing you really have to do is to say, there's got to be an authentic connection here. They've got to see an authenticity in the message that we're asking them to carry on from the management tier. They've got to see it in us. There's nothing, you know, that's not a Jeff Masonism. That's not a simple Biz 360. That's just something that, really is common sense at this point. And the other thing is to understand, and this was really fascinating for me. I did a consulting program in Australia recently, and we asked the 17 people on the call, and we said, what makes your company unique? And you're going to see that your viewers will see that green ball in and amongst orange tennis ping pong balls behind me. That
Yeah.
green ball is to make us really understand and remember that our customers want us to be unique. They want us to be, they want to give companies their money, that those companies in return are proving to them that, hey, I made a good decision with my money because these guys are unique in the way they service their, and they treat me better. So I said to these people, what makes you guys unique? And 17 people rifled out all these words, and I wrote them all down. I read them all back to them, and not one of those words was a feature of their products or services. It was
Wow.
all, we care about people, we're trustworthy, we're we're
Mm,
dependable, we're proactive, we're sympathetic. It was all these values. And I think we really need to understand that our employees, if we want buy-in from that employee tier, we've got to set the core values right. And they've got to be breathable and interpretable on every angle of the company. And they've got to connect. They can't disconnect. And it's the
mm,
hypocrisy, I think, that gets a lot of companies in the way. The rank and file says, hey, the boys upstairs aren't, they're not walking this walk. They're asking us to, but they're
right,
not. And
right.
that's where you get into trouble.
Yeah, it's so good. I'll take it.
Amen.
Jeff,
And
really appreciate you, sir.
yeah. Yeah. No, that's what we're all about. Simple Biz, we're fun, man. I do 3 coaching programs. I got what I call surfing, snorkeling, or scuba diving. So I work with you on the surface three months. I get mid-tier with you for 6 months. I do a year-long walk with you, and we look for improvement goals on the customer satisfaction, customer success angle. The podcasts are all geared towards that. Everything kind of funnels into that, how to create a better experience for the customer. The book, the same thing. And so, we're breezy, we're fun, we're authentic. We don't, we tell stories. We just, trying to have fun with it. And so, anybody wants to join us along, Duke, we're like I said, we're Simple Biz on every platform. So just Simple Biz on Instagram, on LinkedIn, on YouTube. You go to any one of the listening
Yeah.
platforms out there. So any rate, that's where they can find us. The book is SimpleBiz360 on Amazon. You can get it from my website, which is SimpleBiz360.com. So just SimpleBiz360.com. You can buy it straight from there. You can buy it on Amazon. And we're just, dude, having fun. And I never imagined, it would be this fun at the end.
Yeah. Yeah. Come on. That's great.
I say the end of my career. I'm coming into let me put it this way. I'm looking in the rearview mirror behind me. The sun's starting to set. You know what I mean? I'm
Mhm.
going to be 64. So let's face it.
Come on. Yeah. Well, thank you for being here. Thanks for doing this. Thanks just overall for just your generosity in these things that you do in the content that you put out with the podcasting, with your writing, with just all the stuff. And so I think that it's really making an impact and adding value to the lives of many, many people. So thank you so much for that. And so good to connect with you after
Yeah.
all these years, Jeff, for real.
Absolutely, brother. Well, tell your mom I said hello and your sister, and it's wonderful seeing you again, Duke. And thank you for serving the Lord the way you are. We appreciate it, brother. You're a gift. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
All right, man.
Be blessed, sir.
All right, you too.
And
Good
hey,
luck on the move. Best wishes on the move to Houston.
yeah, thank you.
All right.
And thank you everybody for taking the time. If you checked out this episode, really appreciate you guys for being here. If you were watching it live or listening on one of the podcast platforms or whatever, you guys are amazing. Thank you so much. Make sure that you check out SimpleBiz360.com. You can find the book, the podcast, other resources. Check out all the links that are listed in the show notes for the podcast on the different podcast platforms for more resources and all of that good stuff as well. If you guys got anything out of the episode today, if it blessed you, challenged you, encouraged you, made you think, or anything like that, if you would consider subscribing, sharing, or leaving a review, that would really, really mean the world to me. So thanks again. And thanks again, Jeff. Bless you, brother.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, guys. Take care.